There we go.
We have here today on the Moms Without Capes podcast a friend of mine, Shelby Jo Long. Welcome to the show, Shelby.
Great. Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, I'm excited for this conversation. So, Shelby is a multi talented individual who wears multiple hats as an entrepreneur, professor, published author, and business consultant. Her expertise lies in helping busy professionals turn their skills and knowledge into a lucrative income stream. With her guidance and support, individuals can transform their passion into a successful business venture. In today's episode, Shelby will be sharing with us how to discover and live your passion so that you can feel fulfilled in your work. So, before we dive into all of that, would you mind sharing with us more about your journey and what has brought you to where you are today?
How much time do we have?
I know. I have read your book, so I know your story, but there's listeners here that just kind of give us
I'll give
bird's
you
eye view.
the broad overview. So the most recent thing, I'm a professor at Rocky Mountain College. I've been there for 17 years. I love teaching. I have passion for teaching. I entered into being a professor after I graduated college. But the other kind of background piece to that is that I'm a college debate coach. I was a competitor in college, and then I wanted to give back to the college debate community. And it's such a great, vibrant community, and traveled all over the world and the US, and it was really fun. And then COVID happened and it kind of killed that. But I still teach at the college. I work half-time, and I teach the classes in business communication and organizational communication. Public speaking, small group, all those basic communication pieces. So I teach about business communication, but then I was ready to step out of the classroom and step into businesses and talk to businesses about their communication methods and how to make them more productive and more efficient. And then on that path of entrepreneurship, which I started probably about 3-4 years ago, then my consulting business has developed to that. And as a business, I do a few things. And so I have my own business where I work in the organizational leadership and culture space. But then also in my other program, I help people create businesses out of their genius, their passion. And that's my own thing. But then I'm also CEO of a publishing company, independent publishing company. I have nothing to do with publishing, but I have everything to do with the business development after you publish a book, because you don't get rich by publishing a book. You have to have things around that. And then I also am part of this global consulting council. I'm one of 10 people on that, the strategic advisor board, and we help businesses scale. And then I've just recently created a business it's called the Apex Leadership Institute. And it's all about promoting leadership and growth in leadership in our leaders. So that's
You are
the
busy lady. That's like 10 different hats you just described.
I know, but fortunately things are pretty well aligned. So everything I do in my own business supports all those other businesses. And, like publishing company, I have nothing to do with publishing, but I do the business development on the other side of that. And then I have access to the strategic advisor board, which helps out with that. So I very much stay in my genius zone and work in my genius. And then I pull in people around me to help solve those other problems that I can't do, like create websites and, figure out credit card processing and all of those things. Like you got to stay in your genius, you got to delegate that power to the people that do those things really well, and you could stay in your zone. So
what, like people that is their zone of genius.
Absolutely.
Right. And
absolutely.
So talk to us more about the zone of genius and what exactly that is.
Yeah. Again, it's not something that's clearly defined, but at least in my interpretation of it, your genius zone, when you're in your genius zone, you're doing things that are intuitive to you, that are second nature to you, things that you just know how to do, that have been developed from your worldview and from your experiences. And it's just something that you know how to do, a problem that you know how to solve. I'll give you an example of mine. So I've been a college professor for 17 years. I've been in the college debate community for 20 some odd years. And so something that's very intuitive to me is creating a plan for like a lesson plan. How do I teach something? That's intuitive to me. That's something that I could put together a 60-minute lesson plan in a very short amount of time, because I've been speaking about the same things, because I'm in that area. It's those things. I could teach people argumentation skills. I've been doing that for 20 some odd years. So it's something that's very second nature to me, something that's in my intuition. And when I'm in that space, then when I'm operating in that space and I just know what to do, I don't have to think about it. I can just talk about it at nauseum for some people, so, and I stay in that space. But then I feel like generally when you're in your genius zone, you just feel good, and like you are more creative and you're more productive and you find more things to do and you discover more possibilities because you have that base foundational knowledge. So, when I'm not in my genius zone, it's when I'm like trying to figure out the problems and what do I need to do to figure out this. But when you're in your genius zone, you're working in something that is innate to your knowledge. And then it allows you to be more creative because you have that foundational piece to you. So that's what I would kind of describe as the genius zone. And I'm fortunate. I built a business around it. And so I get to operate in that space. So
Right. I think back when
sure you can resonate with too. So
yes, like almost like there's been so many times like filling out, I don't even know, like not even job resumes, but like things where you've got to explore your strengths. And I remember feeling stuck. Like I would call my mom or ask my husband, like, what am I good at? Because I feel like that's a hard place to identify for yourself because it's so innate, you don't realize that I still do it. Like I'm like, not everybody knows this. Like this is so easy. Like, and I think when you're in it, it's hard to recognize what it is that you are good at and what is your zone of genius. So for people like me, or like people that may be in that place right now, what kind of ideas or what suggestions, like where do we even start to even know what it is that we are, what we're genius at?
Sure. So I'll give you an example. I'll answer the question, but I'll give you an example first because of what that conversation made me think about. So I've been teaching, as you know, I teach, and I've been teaching. I just finished this class called business communication, which is the whole focus of that class is to prepare you to get into the workplace and to prepare you to apply and interview for the job that you want after you leave college. And that whole idea, and that, so you got to put your resume together, you got to put your cover letter together, and it's not just something that you do. You've got to do some thinking to, especially like put yourself in a college student. At that scale where you don't have a ton of work experience. Right. Maybe you have some as a working in a coffee shop or whatever, but you don't have that experience when you're applying for these bigger jobs. But the activities that you do, and similar to what you're talking about, the strengths that we have, that all of those teach skills. So for example, 40% of students at Rocky are athletes. And I had a lot of athletes in my class. And you've been a student athlete for 4 years. That means that you've learned some pretty important skills about working in a team and communicating with others, and learning skills about discipline, and learning skills about authority and systems and how it all works together. Like there's a lot of things to think about. And a lot of these skills and this genius comes down to your communication and how you understand that and communicate that around with the people around you. I tell those student athletes, your front page of your resume should be filled with your skills, because you have been working in that zone for 4 years. That's what you know, and you've dedicated yourself to that activity. And us too, us entrepreneurs, we have that too, but it takes that time of self-reflection, right? You've got to do that deep dive of, where are my strengths? What are my weaknesses? Put the chart together. What are my opportunities? It's a SWOT analysis, right? So what do you like? What don't you like? I know that I don't like accounting. I don't like math.
Yeah. You could definitely discount that from being part of your zone of genius.
I'm not detail oriented enough to deal with that. but give me the bigger picture things like communication strategy and putting together presentations. And I love those things. And so
Right.
that's kind of just, I mean, I think that's basically where you start, or like, what are my strengths? What are my weaknesses? What do I like? What don't I like? And I think
Right.
that kind of helps, at least help you kind of identify where you gravitate your skills towards. So
Right. Right. I think, I mean, you're talking about college graduates, but I'm also thinking in my mind, like, say, when in 2017 was when I went back to get my license. So I had already had my master's, but life had taken me in the previous 14 years in so many different routes. Like I became a Zumba instructor, a Girl Scout leader, director of a nonprofit. Like I was doing all of these different things. And when it came down to like, okay, now I like want to apply, I was applying to a mental health center and I'm like, what, all of these things that I've done, like, what do I do now? And at that point, I could have used you then, Shelby. I didn't know you then, but I really could have because
yeah.
I was at this point where I was like itching to do something, and all that it felt like I was looking at dance studios. I was looking at like different things, like what can I do with what I know that I would enjoy? Because they say like if you find something you love, you'll never work a day in your life, and like these kinds of things. And I really had no idea. So what I did was just fall back on like what I had gotten my degree in, and that was counseling. I had no idea if it was something that I still liked, if it was like in those, I'm thinking of like the way like a quadrant, right? Like there's things that I liked that I was good at. Like I had no idea if it was my zone of genius, but I just fell back onto something that I kind of was familiar to me that made sense based on like what I was. But it was at that point where I was like, there's transferable skills. Like, how do I even bring that into making something out of, like, I felt like I was making something out of nothing. Like, what do I do? And how do I filter all them into something that makes sense that would, one, like get me back into the working world. But then even at that point, like if I had access to like your book, or if I had access to you, and to be like, maybe that wasn't what I wanted to do. Maybe it wasn't like, maybe that wasn't where my genius was like going and working at the mental health agency. Maybe I could have just completely like bypassed that and really dove into like my genius, like not having to go through all that. Yeah, it's
But in hindsight, like all that experience that helps you, right?
absolutely,
Like
absolutely.
you have experience, and that experience at least helps you shape what you,
Yes.
the future that you want, if you will.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because if we live in that space, then then we don't want to be regretful. We want to look at it as growing and all that. But
Right.
it's true. I have the same thoughts. It's like, what if I would have started my entrepreneurial journey 5 years?
Yes.
Well, I started about 5 years ago, but what if I
Yeah.
started 10 years ago, right?
Right.
And
Right.
I think about that, but then
But you needed to make all of that happen in order to
yeah,
get to where you are now.
yeah.
Yeah.
So
And to be able to find that zone of genius.
and maybe, and I've talked to a lot of other corporate refugees, right? That are tired of corporate America and they want to get out. I'm an academic refugee. You want to find another place for your expertise and your knowledge. And there's, there's even a breaking point where you're just ready to influence more people and be in a space to really let your genius shine. And I think that takes confidence. I think it's all a timing thing. So I think it happens
Right.
at the right time, and
Right.
to not be regretful or shameful that it hasn't happened before. Because I
Right.
think that battle too, for sure. So
Yeah, yeah. So there may be some women listening who are considering maybe breaking into the entrepreneurial space, but they're just kind of at a loss as to what they even want to do. Like they're not even at that point, like to decide a niche, like or a niche or however you say it, but like they're just curious as to what they could bring to create a business. What are some like what suggestions do you have about where they would even begin to explore that space?
good question. I think that first of all, to be understanding of that, like the answer is not going to happen right away. It's going to take a while to get there.
That
But
self-reflection piece.
yeah. So I mean, it doesn't happen immediately. Like the successful entrepreneurs out there have tried and failed many, many times, right? Like
Right.
it's not going to work the first time when you launch your first business. It might be different in a year or 2 years, it's just, I think having that recommendation or that like awareness about that. But I would say start getting into a space where where other entrepreneurs exist, right? If you think you want to start a business, awesome. Start going to things like Million Cups, which is every Wednesday morning down at Rock 31, right?
For
Or
those of
start,
you not in buildings, check it out because it's a national thing. It might be in your
yeah,
town.
and it's everywhere. So there are entrepreneur communities or small business support communities in every community. The Chamber of Commerce, they always have things. So I would say to be in that space and to be having those conversations is the first place to start. Because if you're not in that space, you're not surrounding by people that are of the entrepreneurial mindset, you're not probably going to be in the space to influence you, because you'll learn so much just from people, like real estate agents and insurance agents that work on commission. Like they are entrepreneurs too. And so like learning about those methods and the networking and how important that is, I think that's a place to start. And then especially if you want to create a business out of your own genius, I mean, there's a process, and I talk about it in the book. You got to start with like that self-reflection and your identity and your brand and your niche. I don't think you have to niche down to a person or an industry or
Right.
a place necessarily, but I think you've got to focus on a problem that you solve and the transformation that you can deliver, like what you're doing, like the Moms Without Capes. I think that's awesome because you have a community, and
Yeah.
and you're providing a community of support and sharing stories. And I think that's amazing. And there's a need for that. That's a problem that you're solving. So I think that's kind of where there's like who you are and the problem that you're solving. And then what community do you want to be in? Because you gotta kind of think about it and then feel it and test things out. And then you gotta be in that community to be able to make it
Right.
work.
And definitely willing to test things out. And I had read your book when I already started my business, and I even came to one of your workshops. And so just having that clarity, and every time I go to events that have like entrepreneurs, just like you're saying, I feel like I learned something more about myself
Absolutely.
as I'm like creating these relationships with other people. I'm like, when I first started my business, I hired a business coach, and I just remember like I hired when I was like my husband, should I do this? Should I just, because it was a lot of money? And he's like, well, just do it. Right. Like I felt like he's like, you need the confidence. And like after a week, I was like, I could have totally did this. But the whole idea of being surrounded by other people who are on like a similar path was just like, I felt like this whole world busted open. And I'm like, how did I not know? And just like when you're saying, like, there's these, in the town, like you have to look for it. Like right now, you might not even be looking for it. They might not even be like, if you're listening to this and you're curious, like there are organizations that exist right in your town. And because you haven't been looking for them, you're not seeing them, but all you need to do is look for them. Like,
Yeah,
they're
they
there.
are there.
Yeah.
And that I think that's the thing too, is that we get, and just like transitioning from the academic life into the entrepreneurship world, like it's a very comfortable, safe place to be, right? And I love teaching and I love everything about that. But then I was feeling kind of limited because I wasn't really speaking to the audience that the theory was all about. So I wanted to get out into the business world. But then, it's uncomfortable. And so being in that space, I'm an expert over here and I am an expert in communication, but then you step into the entrepreneurship world and you got to put yourself in a position where they'll start to listen to you, right? You don't just immediately get that. You don't immediately get business because of that. So it is stepping out of your comfort zone, and it's taking a risk. And I think that's one of the biggest things that I've learned on the entrepreneurship journey is that it's risk taking, and there is a risk to it. And yes, it's an investment in time. I mean, I have, similar to you, I've spent money on coaches because I want to do these things and I want to have this bigger influence and I want to create a business out of my genius, but I needed a mentor. But it's risky to do that because business is risky. It's just
Yeah.
genuine.
Yeah. So I have my own answer to this, but I would love to hear your answer. What do you find is the most difficult part about starting and building a business?
That there's probably a few things I would point to. I would say the knowledge about starting it and finding the right mentor would be my first kind of piece that I would say, because I think that's challenging. So you have to, if you work with a business coach or you work with whoever, you want to make sure that there's a match to what it is you want and the skills that you have, and that it's a good match for you and where you're at in your life.
That you feel the chemistry.
Right, because you want
Yeah.
you want to work with somebody that help you perform at your best.
Yeah.
Worked with some people that haven't been that way, that have been all about the money and
Right.
that, which sucks. But that it's capitalism. That's going to happen.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I'd say that, and then to not be scared, to know that you might fail.
Right. Not be afraid to fail.
Not be afraid to fail, because that's what our marketplace is constantly about. That
Mhm.
businesses do that. Very successful businesses try ideas and they fail all the time.
Right.
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 And they make a lot of money and then they fail.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
entrepreneurs too, that you try something and you launch it and then it doesn't,
Right.
work.
But just getting back up and learning and moving forward and
Yeah. And
doing
what
something
can I
else.
do
Yeah.
different next time?
Yeah.
So there's that. Don't be afraid to fail, but also know that there's an investment in that too.
Yeah. Yeah.
That, it might take some of your confidence, but it's the perseverance too that helps
Right.
you push through those things. So
Right.
I think just recognizing those things, and nobody's going to have the solution for you. That a lot of that's going to be created by yourself.
Right.
So that
Right.
there's a lot of those things. So I went through about 5 different lessons.
Yeah.
But I
Yeah.
think it all kind of ties down to that. Don't be afraid to have the confidence and step out there,
Mhm.
even though the path might be rocky.
Right. Right.
And
Confidence will come with taking action.
it will, and it will build, because you might have a failure, but man, you'll have a success.
Yeah.
And then you might fall back and something might not work, but then you'll have another one. So, and then what I have found to be really beneficial. I mean, I have 4 businesses, which is a lot, but one is mine, but then I'm in all these partnerships, and
Right.
I love working with people. I think it's so much fun. And if you don't be afraid to take that risk, and to, yes, it's capitalism. Yes, we're trying to make money, but a rising tide lifts all ships. And so there's no reason to not collaborate with your competition, right?
Right.
It doesn't
Right.
matter, because it's all going to come around. It's a karma thing. You just gotta trust it. And it comes to trusting yourself first, and trusting that you're working where you need to be. So.
Right. Right. Yeah, I agree. One of the hardest parts about in my opinion, is to about starting and like building the business are my own expectations, like keeping them in check. And especially as it comes to time, like removing the timeline and continually, like I'm always telling myself, this is a marathon, not a sprint. Like this is where I meant to be. So it's going to take some time. Rome wasn't built in a day. Like that expectation in particular is one that I on the daily have to remind myself of, and like just keeping those expectations. And that's where a lot of that self-reflection comes in place. Like, what am I expecting? What is not matching? And how can I shift in order to celebrate those victories that are sure to come? So we talked over what's most difficult, but what are some benefits? Like, why would somebody want to start their own like business or entrepreneur adventure or whatever? Like, why would they want to find their zone of genius and make something of it?
Because it's where you perform your best, and it's where you are happiest. It's where you're most fulfilled. And I think that's just those things that are intuitive to you and they're easy problems for you to solve. That doesn't mean that maybe you don't like it, but it's where you perform your best. And then don't be afraid to dig into that and discover what the potential of that is, because if you know it's your intuition, you know how to solve that problem. Imagine what you could do if you expanded on that and made that a business and helped other people solve problems. I mean, that's what coaches and consultants are doing and businesses are doing. They're solving problems for people. And imagine what you could do if you created a business out of it. So, I mean, there's just so many possibilities. I could give you numerous examples. I've worked with accountants. I've worked with optometrists. I've worked with life coaches. I've worked with business coaches. I've worked with people in the ag industry. There's just so many different possibilities of ways to communicate with and engage an audience. And when you're talking about things that are in your zone, that, it's not limited to a program or a course that's online. It's community. It's about transformation. It's about, there are people out there that are seeking the same things that you might have the answer to. So there's that fear in that. And I think there's you don't understand the fulfillment until you're in it. Right.
It's hard to describe.
So, yeah. And that's not to say too, that you don't necessarily need to create a business out of your genius to do that, but understanding your strengths and living to your full strengths in whatever you're doing, whether you're a mom that's staying at home, or whether you're working in a bank, or whether you are a real estate agent, whatever that is, then understand that and be most fulfilled in that area. So,
yeah. Any final advice that you'd like to offer the listeners?
I think just don't be afraid.
I feel like you just did. Like you just were like, just do it. Just do it.
Right. I'm very much a life is too short and you never know what's going to come tomorrow kind of person. So, I mean, there's no reason not to be happy. Right. So find something that makes you happy and go for it and create a life out of it. And even if it starts as a side hustle, awesome. Have it be a side hustle. You'll be fulfilled over there. Just balance it with whatever else you have going on. I know stuff is busy. I got 2 little kids. I've got 4 businesses. I still teach. So, I mean, things are busy.
Yeah, you got it. Yeah.
But if you find something that really floats your boat, do it, because there's no reason to not be happy.
So, Shelby, what do you do for fun in between all of this stuff?
What do I do for fun? Well, I was just having a conversation the other day with my friend, and I was like, gosh, the sun's shining. I'm ready to get out on the paddle boards again and get out and exercise in the summer. I love being on the water in the summer. It's a lot of fun. So we paddleboard and we raft and we do all sorts of things in the summer. I do like to be outside. What I do, I would say this is not what I do for fun, but this is what I do to kind of be in my, so I think yes, you could be in your fulfilled in your zone of genius, but then also you need to not always be there. You need to take a break. And I'm training for a half marathon that's here at the end of June, which I don't like running. I'm not a runner, never have been. I wouldn't call it running what I do. I call it more jogging. Yeah. And not at a very fast pace at all. But
that's my type of running. I've run 4.5 marathons. So back in the day, I was never the fastest. My goal was always to complete it, not necessarily to compete in it.
Much like running a business, right? Like you gotta, you'll hit your stride. Give it 5 years and you'll hit your stride.
It's all good.
What that does for me though is it gives me time away from the screens. It gives me time to, I listen to my podcast and listen to something funny or something that inspires me. I tell you what, I was on a run the other day and I was listening to this podcast interview and this it just clicked in my head what I wanted to speak about. I gave a TEDx last weekend in Delaware and it just clicked in my head how I knew what I was going to speak about, but I was trying to find the right frame for it. And then it turned out so well. I was really happy with it. So just I think there's an important piece about stepping away from what you do and being in a space where you're not thinking about it. Cause that's when you're also creative. Yeah. So the running and spending time for myself and making sure that I'm, sleeping and exercising, all those things. but then spend time with my kids too. Kids are little only once, and
Yeah.
they're
Yeah.
sure fun. And so, my son's 8, my daughter's 10, and they're really a good time. And so
I can't believe I totally forgot to ask you about the TEDx talk when you went to Wilmington.
Oh.
And I could have put that in your intro because I think you sent me your bio like way before you did the TEDx talk.
Well,
Okay.
and the TEDx,
so for everyone listening, she is also a renowned TEDx speaker.
that TEDx is just, and I just got back on Monday. So it's been kind of a whirlwind since I got back. But yeah, the TEDx, it's a lot about my book and a lot about the journey of entrepreneurship, the journey after I got in the car accident. And it really does come down to staying in your zone of genius and think about it, like vision what you want for your life. Feel it means you have to be in it, and you have to test things, and you have to have some feedback, and then you got to live it. You got to be in that community. And that's kind of where it all kind of turns out. But doing something fun is also a part of that too. So
yeah. So do you have a book that you would like to recommend?
Well, yeah, my own. I See Your Genius, Transform Your Idea into Income. If you're curious about it, curious about stories, curious about connections, curious about anything communication related, I think that's a great one. I also, books, I am kind of a nerd when it comes to books, but I also listen to Freakonomics a lot, which I learn a lot of important lessons in Freakonomics about money and about trends. And I like all of those things. And I really love listening to How I Built This. I have the book, How I Built This too, but listening to those entrepreneur stories and listening to those journeys, like that's influential to me. And it helps me feel better about some of the challenges I'm going through, but B, it helps me like understand that perseverance that it takes, and to understand that, yes, I'm in my genius zone and I'm happy doing what I do, but I'm not going to like everything that I do, but I'm working towards the overall vision and goal of like being in my passion.
Yeah. All right. So where can listeners find you?
I have my own podcast called the Genius Entrepreneur Podcast. You've been on it, so your podcast is in there. I've got, and you can find that on Spotify and all the streaming channels. I've also got my website, shelbyjolong.com, and you can find all my resources there. You can hear me on podcasts. I have a YouTube channel, The Genius Entrepreneur. Shelby Jo Long is the channel, so you can find me there. I have lots of information out there. Also, I'm part of the Strategic Advisor Board, so you can find me on that site. You can also find me on the Rogue Publishing Partners website. So if you ever need to contact me.
Right. And all of Shelby's information is going to be found in the show notes of today's episode. So I want to thank you so much for coming on the show today.
Oh, thank you, Ani. This was awesome. I love being interviewed. It's fun. But somebody that's in the same space.
Yes.